Hello and welcome to Speaking Out on Financial Abuse, stories of survival and hope after financial abuse in a marriage or romantic partnership. I'm your host, Lori G., and today from St. Thomas in the beautiful U.S. Virgin Islands, we welcome Ana Jimenez. Ana is a case manager and advocate for the Family Resource Center. Their mission is to end family violence in the Virgin Islands by providing crisis intervention, counseling, emergency shelter, aiding victims in obtaining needed services, including legal and financial assistance, facilitating job training and placement for victims in order to promote their financial independence and esteem, providing educational outreach, and enriching communities of the Virgin Islands. Ana, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
So, where in the world are you, and where are you originally from?
I am in St. Thomas, U.S. Virgin Islands, which is not too far from Puerto Rico, which everybody seems to know where Puerto Rico is. So we're about a 30-minute flight from Puerto Rico, and I live on St. Thomas, which is one of the three islands that comprises the U.S. Virgin Islands. And the three islands are St. Thomas, St. Croix, and St. John. St. Thomas and St. John is one district. St. Croix is another district. And in the St. Thomas, St. John district, we also have Water Island, which is a smaller island that is inhabited. But that's basically the Virgin Islands. And I was born and raised here in St. Thomas. And my parents migrated here from Puerto Rico back in the day when Navy was doing exercises in Puerto Rico, Se iba Culebra. And so they migrated here and settled down.
Have you seen much of the mainland states, or is it just so pretty where you are? Who cares what goes on in the mainland?
No, I've had an opportunity to travel. In my other life, I worked for the government as law enforcement. So I've been to Las Vegas, Arizona, Florida, Georgia. I've been all over, Chicago. And each one has its own distinct features, and each one is nice and beautiful in its own way. But there is nothing like being home in the Virgin Islands.
Oh, I can imagine. I wouldn't want to leave either. Well, before we dive into what the Family Resource Center does, and you cover, as you just mentioned, naming these parts of this territory, it's a pretty wide organization. How did you personally get involved in the domestic support field yourself?
So that's a little bit of my backstory there. So I was a police officer for 20 years for the Virgin Islands Police Department. In the 90s, the legislature of the Virgin Islands implemented a domestic violence law. And so the domestic violence law of the Virgin Islands addressed issues like not just the police report, but the duties and responsibilities of law enforcement with respect to assisting victims, removal of victims, providing shelter, and so on. So during that capacity, I knew of the Family Resource Center because that's where we would take our victims that needed to speak to a counselor, or if they needed to be housed secretly, we would take them to the shelter. So I knew of the Family Resource Center through my law enforcement years. And after I retired, I wanted to continue helping people. So I got my degrees in counseling, did my internship at Family Resource Center, and they hired me. And I'm here today.
And where did you get your degree in counseling? Did you do that on the Virgin Islands?
So I started at the University of the Virgin Islands, but I really finished my bachelor's and my master's at Liberty University.
That's just fantastic. And the Family Resource Center, so it sounds like they've been there for some decades. How did it get started and how did it grow?
So the Family Resource Center has been in our district, St. Thomas, St. John, Water Island, for close to 40 years. And it started as a vision of a social worker who knew that there was a need to protect women and children. And they started, and that would be Dilsa Capdeville. And she started by actually hiding women out in her parents' home and using her own vehicle and providing that advocacy. And so from there, the Family Resource Center birthed. When they started it, it used to be called Women's Resource Center. But then as years progressed, they changed the name to Family Resource Center to encompass a more holistic approach to violence and the family dynamics.
For sure. And it is a family problem.
Yes.
What's the population size that you're serving?
Oh, that's a very good question. We are 32 square miles, which really isn't much.
Do you service all parts of the Virgin Islands?
Yes, we are the only domestic violence crisis intervention agency in the St. Thomas, St. John Water Island district.
Is the population that you're serving, is it mostly folks that have grown up and were born there? A lot of people are retiring out there. What is the demographic of, let's say, the average woman that you're serving?
So the demographic is large. So we don't limit our services just to locals. If you are a victim or survivor of domestic violence, violent crime, child abuse, sexual abuse, human trafficking, elder abuse, and various violent crimes, then you are a candidate for our agency.
Do you get a lot of the cruise lines coming through?
No, we don't get a lot of tourists that are victims, but we do have a lot of persons that are fleeing from domestic violence situations that are seeking shelter in the Virgin Islands. We have people that have relocated to the Virgin Islands from wherever and have gotten into dysfunctional relationship again and can't heal what you don't feel. So you have to do the work. And sometimes, we repeat patterns and we help women, we help men, we help children. We don't discriminate. So all colors, all creeds, all genders, sexual orientation, whether you're a local, whether you are from another island. We also have a large undocumented population. And so our doors are open to all those that need services in those areas. We also provide advocacy. So we may not be able to service the individual based on the situation. And also we are a grant-funded agency. So it may be a service that the grants do not support, or maybe the person is not exactly a victim of domestic violence, but still needs some sort of advocacy. We do provide advocacy and connect to services.
Well, and financial abuse really is just now kind of more loudly being considered a domestic violence issue. They either have no access to money or they're the breadwinner and they can't get this person to work. And the arguments are becoming more and more violent and they're getting a little more scared because they're not recognizing that the financial abuse itself is already domestic violence. And you made such a great point, servicing the undocumented population. Because one of the challenges I hear a lot from other organizations that have appeared on the show is getting these resources out to people who are afraid to seek help because they're coming maybe from other cultures. They may not understand that these resources are actually available. What do you do to try to reach out to people to let them know the service is available?
Well, first, I wanted to touch on something that you said with respect to financial abuse. And the thing with abuse is that when people, not just victims, when individuals hear the word abuse, they automatically feel that there has to be physical. It has to be a rape. It has to be an assault, that there has to be an injury for abuse to happen. And so a lot of victims and survivors, even secondary victims, a lot of them don't understand that financial exploitation, financial abuse is considered abuse. So they don't seek help. And with that respect, because they feel that they're not victimized, they're not being abused. Well, he's just keeping me isolated, or she's just not giving me access to the money, but this is not abuse. And so they don't understand that is abuse. Also, is that when it comes to the undocumented population, is that financial abuse is one of the primary reasons why they stay. And even a lot of the other clients who aren't undocumented, but maybe you have an individual who maybe didn't go to college and decided that she'll stay home and be a full-time mother and wife and caretaker. And so I'm home, so I don't have any access to the finances. I don't think that I deserve access to the finances, so I can't leave. And if I leave, where am I going to go and who's going to help me? And so that's the mindset, unfortunately, of the victim, that it's a limiting, self-deprecating kind of mindset that holds them back from seeking services.
And there's not a lot of financial literacy either.
Yes.
They're not coming in with the literacy, or they didn't grow up with it. I didn't grow up with a lot of it. And it's very hard to know what to ask for because you're not even sure entirely, is this a relationship issue? Or you don't realize you just don't have all the pieces to the puzzle, which takes coming to you.
Exactly. And so what Family Resource Center makes every attempt to do is educate the community. So we have a outreach specialist, Ms. Jeanette Jean-Baptiste, and she goes to the schools and private and public churches. Some businesses actually ask her to come and speak to the schools, and covers a wide array of topics from good touch, bad touch to domestic violence, financial exploitation. You know, the outreach coordinator, her job is to go in the highways and byways of the Virgin Islands. And sometimes she asks us to join with her, partner with her, and go to different places. And we are more than happy to assist in that job because basically it takes a village to raise a child. And so it takes a village to really support and spread the word, awareness of domestic violence.
Yeah, because where can prevention even start? And I think it is about coming to the schools and educating the kids. What kind of prevention or what kind of things do you talk about with kids in schools?
In the smaller grades, you know, like grammar school, middle school, we talk a lot about good touch, bad touch. And we try to talk about healthy relationships and letting them know what a healthy relationship is versus a non-healthy relationship. When we go into, let's say, middle school, high school, then we start talking about healthy relationships and domestic violence, because a lot of our middle schoolers, high schoolers believe that if they're in a relationship and the person is looking in their phone and they're being jealous and they're following their every move, oh, he just really cares or she really cares about me. And so this is just attention. But some of these tension-seeking kind of behaviors are toxic and dysfunctional, and they are not in themselves abuse or violence, but they are red flags that can lead towards abuse and violence. So in the high school, we talk about, you know, healthy relationships. We talk about self-esteem or self-worth, domestic violence, and those topics, other satellite topics that kind of piggyback off of those main issues.
Yeah, I mean, stalking is such a big issue. It must be so challenging as organizations to not just keep up with the technology yourself and how you could deliver resources, but also keeping up with the technology on those that are stalking. What are the other big challenges you have delivering services? Now, you have a shelter. That's how you started.
It started as the agency that provided services, and then later on, they added the shelter services. In the very, very beginning, in the infant stage of the agency, it was providing direct services to the clients. And then the need for sheltering was always there. And so then the shelter came in mind. And so historically, when I joined the government in 1992, the shelter was already there. And this agency started probably another 10 or 15 years before that. So shelter services has been a closely connected service to the agency from its inception.
And how many does a shelter hold?
So we have a building that is, so I have to be very careful of how I explain this.
No, I understand.
For confidentiality and protection services. So we have a building located somewhere in our district that houses individuals and families. We are not equipped for housing men. So our services, our shelter services are for women and women with children. However, St. Croix, which is the other island within the Virgin Islands, the St. Croix district, we call it our sister agency, which is Women's Coalition. So we're not directly affiliated, but we provide the same services. So that's basically like the sister agency in the island of St. Croix. They also provide this to the island of St. Croix, the services that we provide here on St. Thomas. They have a shelter similar to ours as well, providing the same services. The difference in St. Croix is that there is a men's coalition and there's a men's shelter. So there are men crisis intervention services available in the island of St. Croix, where those services, unfortunately, at this time are not available on the island of St. Thomas.
How much of you are staffed by volunteers? And do you rely a lot on volunteers, or is it mostly paid staff?
So we do have full-time staff, we have part-time staff, and then we have contract staff. And so it ranges, that whole from end to end. We do rely heavily on volunteers because our volunteers are the ones that are out there helping us to do the food drives and at the fundraising events, and really filling in the gap where counselors may not be able to do it, because the counselors are on site working 5 days a week, 8 hours a day, sometimes more than that, because when you work in crisis intervention, then you can't put a timestamp on a crisis.
Yeah.
So there are still things that need to happen to continue to help Family Resource Center grow and provide the services. So we have our food pantry for victims and survivors, and also it feeds the shelter itself. And so there's a need for food drives. There's a need for fundraising. There's a need for assisting in other areas. And so volunteers are crucial for us to be able to get the work done.
Yeah, oh, for sure. I saw you just did an Oktoberfest, or you were involved with an Oktoberfest where proceeds were going to your organization. What type of other fundraising do you try to do? Do you partner with other organizations to do that, or do you do your own standalone event?
We do both. So the Oktoberfest, we partnered with Pets with Wings. And so they take, I believe they're dogs, yes. So they take animals out of island to shelters in the United States so that they can find their forever homes. I hope I'm explaining that correctly. So we partnered with them for the Oktober. So this is our second year partnering with them and doing this Oktoberfest event to raise proceeds for both Pets with Wings and Family Resource Center, as October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And so we try to bring awareness to domestic violence and raise funds for these two causes that are very much important and very much needed, because pets are important. They're important to the children. They're important to the victim. And so sometimes losing a pet is a reason why people stay in an abusive relationship.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Hearing that the pet's going to be killed or left behind, it's a member of the family. And so being able to partner with Pets with Wings, really good. So that's one event. We also have our Peacemaker Gala that resumed this year. Our Peacemaker Gala is our largest fundraiser. And so that's where we recognize a member of the community that has been pivotal in the area of domestic violence, awareness, and services, and so on. We started that again this year, and it was very successful. So we're going back to our yearly Peacemaker Gala. And we have other events as well that we do throughout the year, which are all geared to either raising awareness, raising funds, or collecting much needed resources.
Okay, Anna, we all around the globe, especially those of us heading into bad weather, we want to know what a gala looks like on the Virgin Islands. It's okay, we can take it.
So I will start with this year. So our kickoff to doing the Peacemaker Gala again on a yearly basis, it was held at Hotel 1829, which is one of our landmark hotels in the Virgin Islands in the downtown area. And it's kind of going back in time with the cobblestone and the mahogany floors. And, you get that old time, that Danish feel, with respect to the wrought iron gates and the floors. So the venue was very nice. It's a formal event, so we have to wear our very best. We had Miss Dilsa Capdeville, who, like I said, was one of the persons that started Family Resource Center. She was our guest speaker. We have hors d'oeuvres and refreshments, and we do different raffles and gifts and different things like that. Talk a lot about domestic violence, and a lot of people attended. So yes, the Hotel 1829 actually overlooks the Charlotte-Amalie Harbor. It's right downtown by the main post office. You could literally look out into the ocean and see our cruise ship dock.
Everybody out there who would like to volunteer
in the Virgin Islands, let us know.
They have their own dock.
So if you want to come on a cruise ship, we'll welcome you.
Well, what do you see coming up for 2026? Because we're already into the last quarter of the year. What is your plans or unique events, things you have coming up next year?
Whew. Well, what we have for next year, we will be doing our Peacemaker Gala once more. We always prepare to improve on events that we've had this year. So we hold our Domestic Violence Awareness March and Candlelight Vigil. So we're always planning ahead, trying to see how we can make our marches bigger and better. Peacemaker Gala is already very much in the planning stages, and that will be sometime around March, I believe.
Is that high season in the Virgin Islands? You tend to...
Well, tourist-wise, season starts from October, November into about January or so of the following year. And then it kind of dies for a bit, around the summer. You would think that summer would be peak season, but it's actually an off season. With respect to guests and tourists and so on, there's a slight decline, but our events are not just geared towards those that are visiting. We really want to educate our locals, and we get a lot of support from the Virgin Islands Police Department. Dare say my old alma mater in a way. So we get a lot of support from the commissioner, the domestic violence unit of the police department. There's always a good turnout from them. We get a lot of support from the Department of Justice and the VI Superior Court and Supreme Courts. The goal is to partner with agencies to continue to spread the word on awareness, but we also want to continue to stay connected to these agencies because we need these agencies. We need the police department support so that we are able to get the police reports done and arrests are made. And we need the Department of Justice and their victim advocates so that as arrests are made, that victims are supported through the Department of Justice and cases will follow their full, from beginning to end. We need the Superior Court and the assistance of them as we file protection orders. And we are allowed, which is something that happens in the Virgin Islands. We had a People's Court Watch. We don't have the People's Court Watch in St. Thomas anymore, but our agency is allowed into the courtroom. And so we're able to answer questions on the spot to judges that are trying to make decisions with respect to restraining orders and, anger management for men and women, connecting to counseling and services, and being able to be that supportive network there in the courtroom is instrumental and pivotal. So what we do isn't just it's victim-centered, but it's not just for our victims. We want to educate attorneys and judges and law enforcement, and we need the well-rounded approach so that victims don't get re-victimized.
Attorneys is a big one. Divorce attorneys, judges is another big one. You mentioned also earlier workplace education, and I see that as being so valuable. Maybe you could tell me a little more about that.
Yes. So, for instance, one of our local supermarkets, they have reached out to us in the past to do conversations about sexual assault. So basically, it's the good touch, bad touch conversation for adults because of the sexual harassment laws within the workplace. So those conversations are had in businesses. We've been asked to come to the police academy and talk to the police recruits about different things surrounding sexual assault and domestic violence. So we try our very best to be everywhere possible to have the difficult conversations and educate and bring to light these topics that are sexual assault, sexual harassment, domestic violence, relationships, and even where to get help and support to know that abuse isn't just physical. Abuse is emotional, psychological, and financial.
And to recognize it in your coworkers, too. You have that coworker that comes in with bruises a little too often. We don't know what the right thing to do sometimes is.
Yes. Executive Director Anya Stewart, she has a slogan that she says, and we say it as well, if you see something, say something. If you hear something, say something. Because too many times people are aware that abuse is happening and they say, that's not my business, that's not for me, I'm going to stay in my lane, I'm not going to say anything. And if they report, then they do want to remain confidential. And I am happy that that is something that can happen. If you call 911, you can, report a domestic violence or some crime as a confidential person, a concerned citizen. But it's important that everyone understands that If you feel within your gut that something isn't right, whether it is how someone is speaking to you, whether it's how somebody is treating you, whether it's how someone is touching you, whether it has to do with how someone handles your money or the household's money, that your gut will not lead you astray. 9 out of 10, you're going to be right in feeling that something is out of place, something is wrong. And it does not hurt to reach out to a crisis intervention agency, whether it be on St. Thomas, St. Croix, or any of the 50 states, that you reach out to an agency and get some advice and just say, hey, I just want to have a conversation. I need to understand something. Am I overreacting or should I be concerned? And those are the conversations that really get things started, because once you're aware that that's abuse, then you're able to make decisions and prepare, and safety plans can be made and things just start to fall into place.
Absolutely. And in pretty much every country, I'm finding there are organizations, nonprofits that can help you and give you resources. And that was one of my first questions. I always ask every guest 2 questions. One is, what is your tip for someone who's listening right now who is under domestic violence but hasn't taken that first step? And you've definitely answered part of it, but what do you think emotionally? Someone who's listening right now is under domestic violence, hasn't taken that first step. How can they gather the courage to do that?
It starts with a decision. And if you want something that you've never had, you have to be willing to do something that you've never done. And sometimes it means taking uncomfortable action. And I believe Tony Robbins is who said that. And so if you are experiencing emotional, psychological, financial, or physical abuse and haven't taken that first step, then I would ask you to think of, you've done it this way. You've done it your way. You've tried to fix it and it doesn't seem to be working. You don't have to make a police report. You don't have to go make a restraining order off the bat, like right away. But if you know something is happening, take that leap of faith and have a conversation with someone who's an expert in the field, a victim advocate in a crisis intervention center, a counselor. Take that step, that leap of faith, and talk, ask questions. What resources are available? Just begin the conversation. And you might realize rather quickly that what you thought was hopeless and didn't have any fixing is not hopeless, and it is fixable. You might quickly find out that where you thought you were all alone, you're really not. You are going to be helped and supported and not judged. And you probably find out that there is actually a light at the end of the tunnel.
That's such a good point, Anna, that it's hope that it could bring you in return to pick up that phone.
Yes. And unfortunately, that's the case. Some people report domestic violence right away and make up their mind and they say, okay, it's over. I'm done. I'm moving on with my life. But for other people, it's not that easy. When we're talking about domestic violence, we're talking about a relationship, and not a relationship of a day or two or a week or two. We're talking about several months and even several years. And that's an investment. And so to see our invested relationship come to an end, that is something that we have to grieve. We cannot heal what we don't feel. I said that earlier. And we have to grieve a future that will never be. We don't enter relationships to end them. We don't have children for them to be fatherless or motherless. That's not what we set out to do when we fall in love and enter into a relationship. And so grieving that future that may never be, because now we're separated, is part of the process.
That is so well said. What is your tip for someone who's listening right now who has left the domestic violence partnership, but they're really not sure what to do next? They have gotten out, but now what do I do to start over?
Begin the journey of self-discovery. Now that you have left an abusive relationship and you're wondering what to do next, this is a good time to do an inventory of your life. Do an inventory of your life, and not in a judgmental way, because hindsight, is 2020. Like, we can always see things clearly after it's already happened and we can see everything that was involved. But taking an inventory of our life experiences is a good thing because we are able to recognize red flags. So when you see, this happened and I should have seen it, but now that I recognize it, I'm going to make sure that I look out for this in the future so that I don't make that mistake again. Work on self-improvement. We are not taught emotional intelligence as we're growing up. We're not taught to set and keep healthy boundaries. We're not taught to work on self-worth and self-esteem. And these are things that as human beings, regardless of whether male or female, these are things that are important. And so the journey of 1,000 steps starts with the first step. So now that you've left, the world is your oyster. And so take the first step.
So well said. Allow yourself to feel free. It could be scary to feel free. It can even feel boring to feel free because you've been either in so many trauma attachments and everything has always been chaos. And I think that's just such great advice. Anna, I am so thrilled to have had you on the show. I really hope that I get a chance someday to come out. I'm going to make it a point. It's good to hear that you are getting connections and resources, but I sure hope it grows next year. And you've been listening to Anna Jimenez. She is with the Family Resource Center in St. Thomas in the beautiful U.S. Virgin Islands. I'm going to put all her links below. And you've been listening to Lori G. And this is Speaking Out on Financial Abuse. Thank you again, Anna.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Fall is all about cozy comforts, but when you're prioritizing your health, it's easy to feel like you're missing out. With Hero Bread, you can enjoy all your fall favorites because they're made with Hero Bread sliced bread loaves, tortillas, bagels, dinner rolls, and more. Try their all-new Hero Noodles with 12 grams of protein and just 80 calories. So skip replacing every carb with cauliflower and indulge in your breakfast, lunch, and dinner time favorites while still hitting your goals. From breakfast bagels and meal prepped enchiladas to mouth-watering burgers and cheesy noodles. You won't believe Hero Bread's options have 0 to 5 grams net carbs and are high fiber from the taste and texture. They've even got small batch drops of indulgent favorites like the popular Hero Croissant. And right now, Hero Bread is offering 10% off your order. Go to hero.co and use code FALL25 at checkout. That's fall25 at hero.co. All figures are per serving of Hero Bread. Contains 2 to 18 grams of fat per serving. See the product nutrition panels on hero.co for more information.
Life doesn't pause when you're sick. Vaccines against respiratory illnesses can help protect you and give you more playtime with your best friend. Depending on age and health status, vaccinations for flu, COVID-19, RSV, or pneumococcal infection may be recommended. Vaccines can help keep you from having a rough time. Learn more at cveep.org/vaccines-protect. Brought to you by the American Lung Association and CVEEP, fighting infectious respiratory disease.